Hey.
Hey,
What's going on?
not much. I'm sitting here in my new office. I think I'm not supposed to be talking in, so I'll be quiet. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just sitting in my friend's bed. It's very cozy.
Sounds good.
So your office has walls and stuff?
Yeah, I'm in the stacks. I'm on the 13th floor. I need to find more posters because this is pretty
Oh,
sad.
wow. That's cool. Hi, Kelsey.
How's everybody doing?
Now it's cold.
And our snow is melting, finally. How are things where you are, Mo?
Winter 2 just started. So usually in Ottawa, we get winter 1, like, December-ish, maybe November. And then around Christmas, it melts down. And then it starts getting cold again. And then in January, winter 2 starts. And that's like the real winter when it actually gets cold. And then that kind of dies down. And then we have like slushy winter 3. And then hopefully that'll end by like April.
Where's this?
Ottawa,
Oh,
Canada. It's not too bad. Could be a lot worse. My boyfriend's family is from Regina in Saskatchewan, and
I've
it's
been
like
there.
cold.
Yeah.
Minus 50 apparently, which
Yeah, I was talking to my family who are in Alberta, and they've had like negative 25, negative 30 snap the last week and a half. And then sending me pictures. Glad I'm not there.
geez. Wait, you were in Toronto, right?
Yeah, I'm still here. I live in
So
Toronto, but my family's in Alberta mostly.
y'all have a bunch of snow right now, right? Or like recently?
Yeah, but it's not too bad. I don't know, Matt. What do you think about it?
I think it's easy peasy.
Matt,
We
you're
had
up.
snow in Buffalo. We had a lot of snow in Buffalo. Well, it was like regular snow, but it was the second big snowstorm. Or it was like 6 inches, which is not a lot.
Matt, are you surfing in it? Ugh.
Sorry, once again, Linux client stopped working while I wasn't paying attention, so I'm on my phone. Yeah, it's been kind of a big outdoor week for me. I had a crazy surf session last week on the weekend, maybe on the weekend on Saturday during the snowstorm, of course, and then the week before, 2 insane whitewater days in the flooding that we had, which were both scary, where I like lost my nerve twice and bailed out of my boat, once with my dry suit zipper kind of a little bit open. So it was really cold. And then on Wednesday, I put my boat up on a concrete block to slide down next to a waterfall, and my boat just went boom right into the river and was gone. I never saw it again. I've been looking for it since then in Hamilton. So that was a lot.
That's terrible.
Whatever. It's your fuck up, your loss, I guess. But
But like, is there no chance it'll show up again? Like someone will find it?
Everybody expects me to find it and is surprised I haven't. And I've been, it empties into this big bay, and if I can just catch it before it flows out into Lake Ontario, I could get it. But, you know, the conditions have been such as, and my schedule, it's been hard to
I'll
get
move
down to
into
Hamilton. Anyway, hi.
we should probably move into check-ins and intros. Does everyone here already know each other? Raise your hand if there's anyone on here you don't know. Okay, cool. Then we will do intros as well as the check-in. And I would not be surprised if more people joined us. But just to get started, the theme or the check-in question, sorry, I wrote this a while ago and it's like hard, but give yourselves as much time as you need to think about it before the first person goes. The question is, what is the theme this year is going to have for you? And we should answer relatively briefly because there's a fair few of us. And we do have real work to do. But also do a name, and if you want to say an organization you're affiliated with, you are welcome to do so. And so we'll do the thing where whoever's ready to go first just goes and then names who has to go next.
Wait, what?
I'll start. Okay, I'm Lourdes, and I am a PhD candidate at Northeastern in sociology. In EDGI, I am with the Environmental Data Justice Group. And like a theme, my theme this year is my dissertation. Yeah. And is that it? Yeah. Now B5.
Hi, Lourdes. Nice to see you again. I'm B5. I work at Query.io. I am he and him are my pronouns. And this year, the theme for my year is like efficient use of time. I have recently had a kid and I work at a company. And so there's no time ever. So but I do love seeing all of you. And so this is one of my favorite ways to spend time. Oh, and I would name, I'm gonna name Mauve next.
Hi, I'm Mauve. My pronouns are they, them. I guess I'm affiliated with the DAT Foundation, but I'm kind of a freelance peer-to-peer person. I'm hoping my theme is art. I want to do more art. Dawn, want to go next?
Sure, yeah. I'm Dawn. I'm based in Toronto. I'm maybe not supposed to, but taking this call from my brand new office, which I'm excited about. And I guess I have been involved with EDGI, but not for the last year. I've been involved with Data Together for a while. So I don't know if I will say any more affiliations. I actually did this theme setting for myself. So I was getting my piece of paper. And I'll say my first one is even less. I feel like I should be as ambitious as Lourdes. I said field work done. That was my I got to do this. I mean, that's not the full year. That's before the end of the year. But yeah, I guess a theme of this year is sort of staying focused on my dissertation project.
And who's next?
Sorry, Kelsey.
Hi, I'm Kelsey. I guess I'm affiliated with EDGI primarily. My theme is trying new stuff. I've been feeling a lot more free and a lot more myself than I have in like a couple of years. So I'm kind of excited to just dive into a bunch of stuff because that's a very me thing to do. Matt, did you already go? All right, you're up.
I'm Matt. I teach at the University of Toronto. I'm an EDGI alum. I have no theme. That I can't imagine what that would even mean. Which I think is a personality deficit. And am I supposed to say something else besides that? And was I the last person?
I think so.
So okay, so back to you, Kelsey.
Thank you. And Data Together theme, Brendan from the Data Together in-person meeting, is using our meetings to get work done and not have homework whenever possible. So our agenda is therefore packed with just really practical stuff. And the first thing is just jumping right into the Data Together reading. And if you will follow the link, which I will paste here as well, you will see that we have this really cool list, our 2020 plan with the theme of polity, understanding our civic role. And we have facilitators for several of them, including the first one already has 2, but there are also several that are person, comma, question mark. So this is an invitation to volunteer to join any of those topics. I'll give you a few minutes to read through.
I'm happy to join any of them. Yeah, I can be drafted for anything. I only just am not quite sure if we have a schedule yet, in case. So I would just want to make sure that I can make it.
Yeah, that's question 2 of this of this part of the agenda. Yeah, Brendan?
Matt, I'm only going to say this because I know you. There are 2 that I think might be interesting to you to take a look at more particularly. The data monopolies and private data and policies. Not so much for the content, mainly because I think you're one of these folks that I think would be great on any topic. But I can make a point of introducing you to Jonathan Victor, who's at Protocol and is here in Brooklyn as well, and make sure that connection is facilitated and that he gets it. It would be awesome, given that you have facilitated a session and he has never facilitated a session. We could make a point of sort of drawing that in, and it might make it for an easier kind of onboarding.
So how about I do number 3, then data monopolies, and I can always sign up for another one. We don't have that many people. So if, I mean,
totally. It's just a suggestion, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. At least Kelsey holding the bag for number 2, but maybe we can sort that in meeting 1.
Did Jonathan come to one or a couple of these calls? I feel like aside from Michelle and way back Matt, a few other folks from Protocol have been, right?
Dawn, you're really quiet, but I think you were asking if Jonathan Victor has been to the Data Together calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's been on at least one conversation, and he was at the in-person meeting. I would love to have help on topic 2, but I also would figure it out. Oh, hey, Kevin. Kevin, we're just looking at the Data Together and looking at who wants to facilitate what.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
But yeah, so I would love help on the second one if anyone was excited about. I wrote up a little paragraph of how do platforms balance freedom of expression versus consent versus offensive content versus algorithmic versus human moderation and curation, which I think is a really kind of hot topic space right now. The major reason I would love help is I feel like somebody else might have a really different perspective and set of readings to draw from. But I'm sure I could find cool readings if nobody wants to jump in.
Could you give a super brief intro on what facilitation entails?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So I think probably people treat this a little bit differently in terms of the intensity. But typically what we have is the issue where people suggest readings, and sometimes the facilitator kind of has to kick off suggesting readings. But usually we'll get at least 1 or 2 people contributing additional stuff once they have an idea of what the theme looks like. And then when I've done facilitation, I've usually tried to read everything, which is probably not a good approach or a healthy approach for most people on this call. And down select to try to figure out like what is the angle of the what is piece of conversation. Let me know, by the way, if my internet skips. It's been happening lately. But then once you kind of have so you down select it to, I forget how many, we were on the order of like 75 pages total of reading that we should distribute to the group. Does that sound right? Yeah, Dawn.
So I think we were at that in terms of the total, but then we were kind of framing it as like really focus on 30. Because I felt like the first year we did that, like we were like, here's 3 to 4 readings, everyone read them. But most people were not finding time, because I think the like cycle was like, you know, just long enough that it's not on your mind to like, I think, be in that rhythm, especially given other obligations. So I think that was the outer bound of what was like assigned, but that there was usually like a subset of like, let's target this, at least at the beginning of last year.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And honestly, what we usually should probably do is have like 2, 3, 4 key readings that kind of are around themes, and then you would, as a facilitator, you would write the themes in the notepad beforehand, just to have something to reference for when the conversation's going. You'd be the one calling on people, but then you'd also be the one who says, oh, let's make sure we cover this theme that was salient in all these readings. Does that cover your question?
We have sorry for jumping in. We actually have a description on what facilitation should be in the README, which maybe we want to revise and update after this call. I just shared the link to it. So it was like things to do before, things during, and things after.
I haven't.
Version. Oh, sorry.
I mean, I'm excited to look at this facilitation thing, but I know something that's worked in the past is just to make sure that each person has read one article, right? And then then if people don't get to all the articles, then it's okay.
Yeah, Mo?
I guess I could help out with the content moderation. I also have a friend who's doing his thesis on like moderation in decentralized communities and stuff, so I could probably ask him for resources too.
That'd be really cool. And your friend is also definitely welcome to join our conversation.
Sweet. Yeah, it's CBLGH, or Alex, he works on Cabal, the decentralized chat thing. It's really cool.
Yeah, we've definitely found it in the past. Multiple moderators makes it, or facilitators makes it a lot. Moderator, facilitator makes it a lot easier. So if you can pull someone in, great. If not, we can make sure that we try and find somebody to sort of help out and partner.
So I want to make sure I got this right. I just went in and if you refresh the data together GitHub issue page, I put Mauve on number 2 and Matt on number 3 with John Victor. Was that correct? Especially asking Matt. Which would also leave private data and policies with John Victor needing somebody, and polity with Stefan needing somebody. And I'm also interested in jumping in on Stefan's one. But I'm worried that we might have a lot of overlap in our areas of interest already. So maybe I would jump in on that later. Does that look right, Matt? Okay, cool. Okay. Are we ready to move on to the scheduling section of it?
Can I ask a question about polity?
Yeah.
I guess I was thinking about the previous threads we've done, and I just looked through the issues and I see some readings that are being like brought up again, and not that that's a bad thing. I think rereading things, if they are resonant, is great. We should be doing it. But I'm wondering if there's a way to like try and, or if it's valuable to try and think about like linking across stuff, because I feel like we did a reading on civics and commons, and I was trying to remember if we did a reading on publics, which all feel like in the mix when polity comes up in my mind. So I don't know, just like a stray thought. No, not, okay, so I'm just looking at the other ones now, not publics, but we did the other two. Anyway, I don't think it has to be like actualized at this meeting. It's just me musing out loud about now that we have like, 16 other ones under the wings. What do we want to do? Or is there a way that we want to relate them?
Yeah, Brandon?
Yeah, totally. Just from the meeting, I think a lot. I posed the thing in the meeting that so Kelsey came up with the concept of polity, but I thought that it was a great segue to build off of specifically the civics reading group from our last one, given that particularly that article on civic republicanism and how much that sort of like just like kind of blew open a barn doors on, I thought, a whole bunch of conversations. So to me, this, like, I almost see this whole semester ideal as being a sort of post that reading group. And I think that reading group to me is a really, and I want to sort of situate a lot of things in context to that. And if we can edit around that and put it in conversation with particularly the civics conversation, that to me would be really exciting. Yeah, I don't know if that helps contextualize some of the conversation that was had at the meeting, Tom, but I very much think that it'd be real. But at the same time, I started hearing, I don't know if I'm misinterpreting what I'm saying, but like, kind of like, can we sort of branch out a little bit and make sure that we're covering new territory with what we're doing? Not yes or no if that's not what you're asking, but new territory, I don't know. I think I agree that like the repetition of readings, like that we shouldn't repeat it if we sort of.
Oh no, I'm not against repeating readings, sorry. I guess I was just like pondering out loud, like, is there a way to, I forget who does this, but it's someone who talks about like it being sort of like a spiral approach, right? So it's like when you like they pass by the same topic, but you're on a different path, like you're on another spiral around that path. So it's not the same place, but like just to think about, like, to sort of recognize that we are in the same place, maybe, is all I'm like wondering. So it's just like, is there a way to be reflective in how we plan this semester, knowing that we have the two other ones under our belt? That's all. But it's cool that this came out of that connection. So it means we're doing the right thing, maybe.
One of the things that might be really cool actually is if we look at, now that we have like the notes or the blog posts or artifacts from previous meetings as maybe an optional reading for the new, just to see what questions we ended with the previous time and see if we can progress on them at all. Do we feel good around the picking facilitators conversation? Or is there more to do here? Cool. And then this is a question for everybody, but I think probably mostly Lourdes. How long should we leave before we need the first readings, so that we can schedule the dates for? So I'm anticipating that I'll put together a doodle poll on picking like which week in a month we would do data together reading discussions around. But previously we've had 1 month, you want to have the readings posted 1 month before the conversation, make sure everybody has time to read them. So if everybody kind of looks at their timelines and ability to select readings, when should our first conversation be?
I think another question is what we want the time frame to be as a whole, because we're calling it a semester. So, and how many weeks do we have on the syllabus?
Well,
Or
we've
themes. I don't mean weeks, but you know, like 7, 6. So I think we should keep that in mind, but also give time, like maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks from now, to get the message out, to invite people and make the readings, post the readings somewhere.
yeah, we've typically once a month. Do we still like that cadence? I know we've done once a month, and then we've like had the last couple of them, I mean, especially last year, a couple months later.
Once a month, like every month, having a call. That seems a little bit hard if you need readings a month in advance. I feel like every 2 months would be easier, but then I guess you couldn't get everything done if it's every 2 months. I don't know. I love books, so I'm hoping to get more readings done.
We could try like an every 6-week cadence. I don't really know what people's plans look like in terms of, and Matt says, I think once a month is a minimum frequency. Does minimum mean at least a month or potentially less than a month? I mean, wait, can you just talk? Never more than a month between, says Matt.
But I also think that if it's more than a month, then people drop off and then there's no momentum.
That's
so
what I meant. Sorry, I totally can't use this app on my phone. Go ahead, Lotus.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brendan.
Yeah, and I think to that extent, the best way to control for it is to assign fewer reading, like smaller reading. Like most of our things have been like, ideally, as others have said, keeping a focus on 30 pages of reading. That most folks say like, hey, cool, try and do this, and then more than that can totally be assigned. But like, if you don't do it all, nobody's going to be upset. It's a volunteer thing. Like, it's not. I don't think it should be compulsory that you like don't show up if you haven't finished the readings. I certainly would not be allowed to go to many of the meetings if that was the case. But yeah, I think that's the way we've sort of maintained it, is rather than saying we're going to assign large swaths of work and make sure that we really grow, it's instead we're going to do smaller, lighter things and keep the emphasis on the discussion. And I think that a lot of the value out of the reading group tends to be the hour and a half of convening where we talk sort of as practitioners and academics working around this sort of area, trying to make sure that we bring our own minds to bear on the topics at hand. So for that, I personally also agree. I think once a month is the minimum. I think we have to do once a month just so that you develop that thing in the back of your head of like every month there should be a reading group. When is this? And I think it helps with attendance and cadence. Otherwise, then we're also running reading groups for more than half of the year, which means that we don't have the other half for planning any other data together stuff.
And that way we can make it more predictable, the schedule more predictable, like every second Tuesday of the month and such.
Do we want to do like Lourdes? I'm trying to extrapolate from timing. Would like the first week of March make sense for the first discussion, or is that too quick a turnaround?
That gives me a lot of time.
Well, you would have to pick the readings by early February.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense to everybody else? Okay. Oh yeah, not just Lourdes and Rika. But Lourdes is here. Okay. Then
I'll notify Rika.
Kevin, you had your hand?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think something that might be useful too is because we already have facilitators for the second and third sessions, and people can start just gathering, those sessions can start gathering readings at the same time to kind of keep the pace.
Yeah, that's a really good call. Okay, cool. Then I'll send out an email with like proposed dates then, and people can write back and say that's not going to work if it doesn't work. But then we'll have default dates if we just start with that. Does that sound good?
Just to make sure I understand, are we going to go with Tuesdays again?
Oh, yeah. Is that okay? I mean, I'm asking the subset of people who can be here on a Tuesday right now, but do you think I need to send something around asking about whether Tuesday afternoons still work / evenings for you all?
In the name of democracy, yeah. But also, it's nice to just say every blank Tuesday, you know, instead of to go through the whole doodle thing, because that can be a nightmare.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I can follow up on that because that's not interesting enough to discuss in a meeting. So I'll follow up with day of week and week of month, specific dates for the reading group. And that is all I have for the Data Together reading group work. Does that sound all right to everybody? Excellent. You know, we might actually finish early. The second topic is, so I have listed here our annual meeting-based goals from 2020 for 2020. And one of the things that we did at that in-person meeting was kind of just talk about how we don't intend Data Together to be this thing that we spend a lot of time and focus on trying to like grow an audience or trying to do like, what we mostly want is for it to be enabling for the members who are participating in it. So if somebody wants to do a thing in the name of Data Together, they should do it, but we're not trying to produce a technology, that kind of thing. So in the theme, the vein of that, we put together the goals of maintain a reading group, have a website that's more up to date with our activities, and share and invite people to join our sessions as we feel moved to do so. By the way, do you want to take a moment to just like silently celebrate the fact that we launched a new website? Thanks especially to Brendan and Kevin for working hard on that. And Kevin especially, I guess. So do we want additional goals or more details on that, or do we feel good about those goals as written?
Can I, sorry, I still can't use the app. Can I ask a question? You guys can hear me, right? So I had this funny thing where I have a little hobby project where I built a website for, that's basically like a water level and wave prediction site, but also has a journaling function where like when you have a session, you record the time and then it shows you graphs of the water levels. It was super fun to do, but I'm pulling data from these various sources, and as I do it, I think about like, you know, edgy data archiving work. And I would, it's not like there's like it's some pressing need that other people should get involved in, because it's just some dumb project that I'm doing that's super fun for me. But it does like showcase for me, because it's practical, questions I have about what it would mean to steward, to take, you know, to steward my own data, you know, or to have a community of people who are jointly responsible to each other for keeping track of this data, because it is a thing where that like it kind of could attract a small community of like-minded people. So it seems in a lot of ways like, even though it's not politically important, it backs on to these questions that we started with in this project. So I would love to have a place to ask those questions, and I don't know what, and I mean, like, basically the people here are the people I should be talking to, or I would be talking to if I could, if they weren't too busy. So I don't know what the way to, is to have that conversation, or if it's appropriate.
Yeah, Brandon.
I think that's 100% appropriate, and ties into a project that didn't get called up on the goals for the year, but maybe what you're speaking to, Matt, sort of revive some of this. Kelsey and her sister have been doing some work where they sort of operate effectively as test users, testing out decentralized technologies and writing them up as blog posts. It's like, hey, I tried to do a thing with a decentralized thing, and here was my experience of that process. Or I tried to explain a thing, and here was my experience of that process. And I think there's I would love to maybe place what you're saying in that vein and put that in a conversation of saying, cool, can we have that conversation in a way that is public and disclosed, and we can talk through some of your options on what you could do and what you couldn't do. Full disclosure, as somebody who runs a company, we have this, we have a similar project that is like collecting our weather for Brooklyn, and it posts automatically every day. It just collects weather data. And so like we could totally talk through that, but I don't think we would want to bias it just towards like query and IPFS as a stack. We should talk about the process of stewarding that data and the things that you would want to care about, right? And what it means. We've been recently having a bunch of talks at Query about like what it means to sign or archive API responses in a way that means that you sort of like know what they are meaningfully. And so like it'd be really fun to like specifically in the data together setting to like at bare minimum talk through the sort of like frameworks of thinking around some of that and have that conversation. And even if you and I just jump on a Zoom call and anyone else who's interested, then we just chat through it and then record that and have that as a thing. I'd be super down to do that. But I think those extracurricular projects are something that we should consider as something that we really want to encourage and sort of like have as part of our ongoing thing. They're kind of self-motivated, so I don't know how to sort of work them into our goals, but maybe we just have a goal of doing a number of them, and add yours to the list, Matt.
Can I ask a question maybe to Lourdes about, I know like in the EDJ group, there was sort of a plan to do that and have people come and present their projects. Maybe like, how did that go? And maybe that's a format to borrow from, or I can offer examples of how people have done that in groups that I'm a part of here at U of T.
Well, for EDJ, I mean, there's always been talk of doing it, but with, I mean, this is where we connect is we, talk about doing stuff, but we don't really have the technical skills or backgrounds generally. But our stuff is mostly how to contextualize data and putting that into practice. But in the talk about Echo and a visualization dashboard for Texas data, it's more about how, it's retrieving data and then not so much archiving it that we're talking about.
I mean, for me, like I look at like the TRU's projects with Anjanong in Western Ontario, and everything that's a little bit harder than what everybody already knows how to do is like a major hurdle for people at their level or at my level of expertise, right? Like if you're already following somebody's textbook example because you're wading through React or whatever, then it's just really hard to step out of line and try to do something a little bit more complicated. So one thing that suggests is that like actually having a blog post where this is how I moved my data from Firebase to Query or something would be really helpful for people in my position, you know. Yeah, I don't know how many of us there are. I think probably more than one. But like, I feel like, I don't know. I'd really love it. Like when I look at the app on Michelle's phone, it's so pretty, the app that they built, and it's so totally not a decentralized format, and I feel kind of weird, you know, like where that Google, you know, what happens when Google shuts down your account and then your data's just gone? I don't know.
Or
But I
when you
think-
run into a paid tier and you can't afford it.
Right.
But I think that's where we can make these connections, right? Because that app is just full of so much information, like about different volatile organic compounds, health effects, and all of that. And it's beautiful, but is there a way that it can be moved to decentralized web? Links? I don't know. Matt, are there oh, is Matt frozen? Matt's frozen.
There's
Oh,
still
and
links.
I couldn't
I'll find
use
it.
the app in the US or with a US device.
You can't use it with a US device. You should,
Yeah, because we
like,
tried to
email me and Michelle together, and one of
I
us
think
can help.
yeah, at least when it was at 4S.
Uh-huh.
So Michelle, because Michelle was there, so I think everyone knows. But
Right.
at that point, yeah.
But like, this is the thing, like if I mean, my interest in Data Together is related to my interest in Edgy, right? Like around this kind of community stewardship and autonomy around data, and there are, in addition to all these theoretical concerns that we talk about in the reading group, there are these practical questions of like what it actually means to build something, and especially when you maybe suck a little bit or you're not a professional. So maybe, like Don was saying, that's something to put in the back of our heads, like to have like an online meeting or some kind of meeting that's more practical in nature, where people present the kinds of problems and the kinds of efforts that they've made or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
don't want-
really interesting. No, I think that's a really good direction to talk about. So one of the things we talked about at the in-person meeting was, first of all, this idea that a member could email the list and say, hey, I want to have an ad hoc meeting around this. Here's the details or the when to meet, and anybody who wants to join can join. And I think that would be a really cool use of this list, because we've now put together a very interesting like cross-section of people who are engaging with these issues. I'm curious what kind of thing would be the most useful? Like, would a conversation be what you need versus like, I'm also looking at, well, what if I was publishing blog posts about, like Brendan was talking about, Dana's in my work, which was briefer than I wish. We didn't produce any blog posts, but to get, like, how does it feel to put data on the decentralized web? How hard is that? And unfortunately, the answer was very, very hard, actually, to do it usefully versus just do it at all. And in some senses, I don't know, I'm starting to ramble, but I feel like in some sense, this conversation group is largely kind of spinning out time until there are more easy, practical ways with the technology to use. Oh, Lourdes, I've been blogging the reading sessions already.
But not all of you.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that would be fun too. I do like it though. Dawn?
So just maybe to think about how to like activate this desire or like sense that there are some of these connections across groups. Maybe it would make sense to like, so there's this group Design Justice, and they have local nodes now that meet, and there's a local node in Toronto, and I've been to a couple of their meetings, and people from Edgear, like Garance also is a member of the Design Justice in Toronto. Anyway, like they have people sign up to like give a little pitch about like what they're working on or a problem they're having. And is there a way we could like just fit that in to some form of whatever data together calls are? Like it might make most sense to tie it to the reading group, but maybe not. That seems like maybe overloading things a bit. Or like kind of have this like, you know, if people want to carve out space on one of these calls, even like 10, 15 minutes to like start the conversation, that might be a way to connect things. Like, I mean, Matt clearly in even this short bit of time expressed like things that would be super helpful to him. I think there's also a way that people who have like I'm sure you all have this experience of like people ask you something that's in your domain area and you can like very quickly like get them redirect them or point them in the most valuable direction. I mean, that could be a start, and maybe there's a way to just make a little bit of time on calls to try and like hold space for that.
That is definitely something we could build into these agendas. If that's interesting to folks. I would be curious to see how much, like, I don't think that people generally interact with the agenda too much because everybody does give the impression of being busy or is generally like has a busy feeling, even if you would make time for something like that, you know? So I like the idea. I'm curious about the practice. Yeah, Brendan?
Can I make an augmenting suggestion? Because I think it's a really good one. The idea that we would just have 15 minutes. What I'd love to do is say, we should try to sort of reach out to folks and say, hey, you should totally come and present at this thing. We've been finding a lot that like if you actually grab somebody by the hand and drag them to a meeting, it goes a lot better. But sometimes it's really hard to do and nobody does it. What I would personally love to see, we now have Mauve, who is like finally, we have somebody familiar with the DAD project on the calls. And like, I'd love to just say, hey, nobody this week showed up to like talk about, to sort of pose a question around decentralization. Can we just have a demo of what you're doing right now in DWeb Life? There's a mention of a chat channel, of a decentralized chat protocol, how to use SSB, like, hey, somebody just turn on SSB today, this is how it works. I think we could fill that time and like just chop the end of the meeting recording and say, cool, here's a 15-minute demo of something that's been happening. I know personally as somebody, like I would glean a lot from that exact reason of, okay, cool. If somebody has a specific question, we can answer a specific question, which would be really nice. But we could also just flip it around if no one is around with a specific question and say, hey, can you just demo something you think is amazing and straightforward and easy? I personally would relish listening into some of those.
I think that's really cool. Is there anyone here who'd be excited about coordinating that stuff? I know that's the big ask.
So this is, oh, sorry.
No, please, you go ahead, Melvin.
So this would be on like the data together calls. I think this is my first data together call, so I have no clue what they're like. But I really, from like what Brendan said, I really took it as more of like a spontaneous thing, like during the call, if there's no one there, or like right before the call, just like prodding someone and like anyone being able to do that, or maybe even like the facilitator can like prod someone to think about prodding someone to do stuff. So it's not like on the facilitator's like to-do list, but if they could have a to-do thing being like get someone else to do that if they want. What do you think of that?
Yeah, what's interesting, I'm curious too what you're thinking in terms of timing, because we have the data together coordinating calls quarterly, and then we have the reading group ones, and then other than that, there's an in-person and so we really have a more frequent, like we don't, oh, am I connected? Okay. We don't really have meetings where we don't have a lot of people showing up or where we don't have an agenda already within the data together space specifically.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that I have to yeet out because my roommate is home. It was wonderful seeing all you lovely people. I'll definitely talk to you more about the reading group stuff. Have
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Farewell.
Bye-bye. Fight the power.
Kelsey, I was just going to ask what coordinating work you would think it would entail. Like, I could see it being very ad hoc as well. So maybe we just have different ideas in mind. So yeah, if you had a sense of things, that would probably help surface maybe some things that I'm not considering.
Ad hoc is fine. It just requires like, so I guess I don't understand the context myself very well, but it sounds like there's some need to have somebody know who's supposed to present and when, and whether it's part of an existing meeting or whether it's another thing. Yeah.
So like the way I've seen people do it where it's super streamlined is like not maybe the invitation of outside folks route that Brendan proposed. So that's always a possibility if people are like, oh, this person will be great, I really want to bring them in. And maybe that onus is on the person who wants that to happen. But it would be like, here's the agenda for this call. We have 15 minutes at the beginning for someone if they have a problem. If you, or like if they have a pitch they want to talk about, if you are that person, sign up. And then the facilitator like shows up to the call and they're like, okay, has anyone signed up? And then they hand it over to them, or no one signs up, like skip it. That's how I've seen it done. And it, so that is, I think, trying to reduce the adding extra work onto the facilitator, like trying to like wrangle folks.
So that would come, sorry to cut you off, that would come with like the posting of the agenda.
Yeah, basically that script, I guess, would change a little bit. And in terms of which call, I mean, because the pace of calls is what it is, like that's where I was asking if we could be good at time boxing ourselves. I trust all of you more than I trust myself on this. Maybe it is doable around the reading group, but maybe not. And maybe you want to keep that separate. And then there's far fewer options for it, but why not still have specific coordinating calls for it?
I really like throwing it into the coordinating call too, because nobody really likes a purely coordinating meeting anyway. And also I like that, and I could definitely make that part of the just regular agenda setting. Thanks, that was super helpful. So I think that all came from the conversation. Oh, Brendan, were you going to speak?
Yeah, just really quick. But I want to circle back. Matt, you had a thing. I'm looking at your thing. We should totally schedule something to talk through this, because I really feel like we can have like a productive indirect conversation about this soon. And that might ideally set us up for like, oh my God, Lourdes, we're already archiving TCEQ data. Like we've been meaning to have this conversation forever. So we should, yeah, it'd be nice to get started, Matt, with yours, because it's really direct. And like I can talk about how to do exports from Firebase and that whole thing.
Yeah, and then once I've done it, I can write a blog post about my experience.
I love it. Like I'd love to get
instructions.
I'd love to get a meeting on the books in the next like 2 weeks. If you
It could be like little tutorials.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the really ad hoc version of this is I really don't think we have a full half hour left on the agenda. So if y'all want to have that conversation as soon as we wrap the agenda, I think that would be really interesting. I would love to hear it.
I do have to go to yoga.
Phenomenal.
Let's have 15 minutes and then or 10 minutes or whatever, Brennan, and then maybe we can have a real thing after I've looked at some resources or something.
So I think that whole conversation came out of the goals conversation. And
Yes.
I don't know if we want to try and formulate a goal around that, or if we just maybe we just needed to have this conversation. No, I'm frozen.
I mean, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's a good goal. And it seems like something we're going to do, and it's nice to have goals of things that we want to do.
Yeah, I think if we just picked trying to do 3 of these and we have one on the books.
Cool. Do we have more discussion we want to do around goals, or do we want to move on? I should really ask these more yes or no, so you can just thumbs up. Are you ready to move on? Cool. The next thing I have on the agenda is that we think the next in-person meeting should be hosted by Protocol Labs. There's no Protocol Labs rep here today. Is that something we need to do anything about?
Where is Protocol Labs?
The ether.
Where? The ether. Oh,
They're distributed, man.
It sounds like I have homework.
If you're up for that, Brendan, that would be lovely. Thanks.
Totally.
I assume they're getting our emails though around reading groups stuff, so that should be good.
Yeah, there have been some departures at PL that some of our key contacts have left, and so yeah, it's making it, the list grows a little smaller of people who were around when Data Together sort of kicked off, who work at Protocol Labs, who aren't completely consumed by some project there, and so it's going to mean building some new bridges, which I think we can totally do, yeah, but I'll make a point of reaching out and CCing people who are in the Data Together, or at least the Data Together mailing list.
Cool. Okay. Final thing that we have on the agenda is a question from me, which is, I've been talking with Kelly, who's the new communications person at Edgy, in case you haven't been there for that. And I had the idea of having a Medium account where we put our Data Together things. And the major idea there is to just have more reach for these discussions that we have. And there's sort of I don't know if this is complicated or not. I know that some people have feelings about Medium, have feelings about authorship, and various of these things kind of come up in this space. Or maybe the simple version of it is we're running on the do what you want model, and that could be a venue for that. So I've had some notes, which are here at HackMD, that kind of proposes different, well, a path forward, but also like questions around, like, should we make a Medium account, or would like specifically Medium is the one I was thinking of because they have really good cross-posting type of stuff, cross-pollination, I guess, like people would actually come across our posts in a way they definitely won't on our website. which doesn't even load in my Brave browser, unfortunately. So I'm not really sure how to lead this conversation. I guess I'm curious what people's takes are on.
You've been talking about this for so long, and it's such a great idea. And these are some beautiful notes. I mean, I've always been on board with it, and I think it's a great way to increase our readership. But the fact that Medium, it doesn't have collaborative authorship is a little messed up. Like, I would call them up and be like, what is your deal? Can't have multiple authors. But with that said, I think listing data together is a good compromise. But I don't know where edgy stands in there.
Well, if we're doing this data together, let's just do it as data together. Edgy doesn't have to sign on, I don't think. And the only thing I would say is, like, if we post under an organization name, then the people who do the work, like who are mostly Kelsey so far, should have their names at the bottom with the link or something. I don't know. But other than that, I don't see why we need to be puritanical. I mean, I may run Emacs, but I still think we could compromise a little bit.
One of the things that I think is really interesting about it is, like, Matt, if you were to write a blog post about your project, I mean, it's possible that could just be published as a Data Together blog, but if you felt like it was more of a personal project and less of a Data Together blog, this could be a nice medium place, as it were, to put stuff of that type with a little bit less feeling like we need to pass it through being a Data Together thing, which is which I guess actually we could just publish anything that publishes to the Data Together blog under the Data Together author, and then if you wanted to publish something else, you could just submit it, and then there would be an editor step. I don't know. It's just a lot of practical stuff that ends up being slightly confusing to execute. But if you guys feel good about it, I could just do what I think is right, and y'all could just tell me if you don't like it.
I feel like, given what's left of this, like, we don't want to, like, protocol ourselves into the ground. I don't know. Does anybody have a different feeling? I don't want to be, like, domineering, but I've definitely, you know, there were moments when the edgy treatment was pretty hardcore on protocol that I recall, and given how few people we are and how little is at stake, say, politically, like, I feel like we should be okay. But
let's just do it.
So long as we keep, I do want to keep the posts on datatogether.org as well, just because if one day we decide, hey, we want to decentralize, it's really important that we just have, like, because we will not be able to do that to the Medium stuff, right? I think I'm a big fan of both, but I think if we ever want to sort of, like, make good on this and, like, decentralize the block, it's going to be really hard to do if it's on Medium. And so I just don't want to set us up for failure in the future. Not failure, just set us up for a lot of work in the future of, like, copy and pasting back into some sort of markdown format. So if we consider our canonical, like, authoring space to be something that is written in markdown and kind of, like, version controlled in a way that we can play with, then I'm satisfied. And I totally endorse and think it would be a great idea to have Medium as well, just to get more eyeballs.
Yeah, I have so many feelings about Medium's exportability.
Ditto. We struggle with this. We just switched to Medium at work, and it's, yeah. Analytics are good, but feel small violin, you know.
But if you have, like, the actual post and markdown, then that can just shoot out. Right.
Cool. Through a manual deploy process. Okay, cool. Then I'll probably at some point do that when it's higher up on my stack. But I'm excited. Is there anything else we would like to discuss in today's official pre-ad hoc conversation data together call? Matt, you have the floor.
Okay, I have to go do some vinyasas.
Yeah, I know.
Bye, everyone.
So is that down to 4 of us? Oh, good. Okay. So I don't know. You don't. Nobody has to stay. Here's the thing. I built this tool. It was for a bunch of reasons. I wanted to learn React. I wanted to keep a journal for 2020 of surfing in whitewater, and I noticed when I just found some APIs that were of interest to me. There are really 2 kinds. There are water gauges, which are all over Ontario. Some of them are run by the Water Office, which is a governmental organization, or some are run by these para-governmental organizations that were set up after Hurricane Hazel to these nonprofit para-state entities, conservation areas that run particular small watersheds. And as I explored them, they're really cool. These gauges, they have all kinds of data on them, so they're like, I can imagine doing a more environmentally interesting project. But for me, for rivers, it's like all I'm interested in really is water levels. So and they have, there are a couple of different pieces of software that run these different things. Most of them are like a Kiwi company and a New Zealand company that sells these gauges, I think, and they have an open API, which is very rich. And then on the other hand, there is weather forecast and what they call nowcast data for the Great Lakes, which comes from this GLOS, the Great Lakes Observatory System, which is a binational entity. So anyway, I do 2 things. I put the current conditions and in principle the forecast for the waves. I make those available online with some graphs. And then also I retrieve data for given time periods and places. So the idea is that you have a set of spots, a set of locations defined, and you pull data for those spots. Right now, I do everything through Firebase because it seemed like something I could do. It's the only reason. And as I have been doing it, I've been thinking about like what would it, like right now I have little chunks of JSON data stored in Firebase. They strike me as kind of in scope similar to the sorts of things that you've talked about in Query, Brandon. But they are a little odd. They pull from much larger data sets, and so there's the possibility there's going to be overlap eventually, and there's an API that gives me exactly the data I want from this other place. If I were to try and store all the data somewhere, then I'd also have to write the API that interfaces to it, which seems kind of silly. And so I feel like there are at least 2 types of problem. One is, how the hell do you host it in a way that somebody going to a website somewhere else can actually access, or using an app on their phone? I don't know the answer. And the second is, what is a sensible way to deal with this like piecemeal data that I'm, my app or my website like looks for these tiny pieces of data, but I know they're parts of a bigger whole. Should I be trying to keep track of that somehow and deduplicating and being efficient? So like, I feel like there are architectural problems that are a little bit outside of my abilities, in addition to the whole problem of, and those problems don't arise if I'm not in charge of the data, because I'm just like, I'll just do whatever, I'll ask for data in the way that they ask me to ask for data, with an API request, with a RESTful API request. But if I were in charge, then I'd have to be thinking, what's the best way to do it? I don't know. That's sort of my starting point.
This is totally fantastic. I think you raised a whole bunch of really, really, really interesting questions. Yeah, and this is like exactly a use case that we've been sort of working on right now. So before getting into the technical details, I think it's important to highlight some of the big questions that you asked, and we have some opinions on this, and this may not be true for everybody, but the biggest one I sort of want to hone in on is you had this question of like, basically you're drawing from a larger data set, and you have this question of like, without the sort of completionist archive of that entire source, like that's the sort of temptation, right? Is to archive everything. And I think after years of doing this, I am now very firmly in the camp that what you are doing with your site, and I do want to actually share, just so that we have this in the history of. Do you mind if I share your work? Absolutely. Okay, cool. Let me share my desktop here really quick. This is really cool. I can click on Rivers, and this is Matt made this, and I can click on the current level. This is updated at 10:10, and I can see the current level of Elora George at Shandam. There we go. Sorry, my bad. There's an update button. This is amazing, and I'm assuming that's going to pull data right then and there if I hit that. Oh, amazing. And then there's actually like links where you can see in the map where, like on a Google map, where this stuff is. Oh, come on, go internet, go. Yeah, that's the whole thing, right?
That's your directions. Your directions.
Directions to, yeah, directions to a drop pin. Yeah, okay. So if anyone was wondering, I'm currently in New York. But yeah, but you can map to that place. You can see this data, and this is amazing. So like, to me, and I think this is the big highlight, is your data set. Just because your data has an upstream source does not mean that you are not the authoritative source, right? The work that you're doing here is curatorial. You are collecting two disparate things and pulling them together into a new thing. As long as you cite your sources and say, hey, they came from here. And ideally, if you develop those sources in an auditable way, that's great. But the value, in my opinion here, of the data that underlies the site that you're building is the fact that it is specifically dedicated to your sport, right? To what you're actually doing, and to folks who will care about that. And so the removal of the larger the like pulling a needle out of the haystack of a water monitor is the labor, right? Is knowing, okay, I'm going to go through, and all I really care about is the water level, and then all I really want to care about is like waves and the current like wave stuff. And then I want to associate this with a journal of entries. I want to actually see like what happened on specific dates. So a couple of things. This is all time series data, but it's all coming from a number of disparate sources. But the value comes from the alignment around this sort of interest, right? And so if we were to think about this as a data set, I think that we run into this question a lot, and we get this question every time. Two big questions that come up. One is like, how do I deal with time? Like, am I just creating like a rolling window of the most recent stuff only, or do I keep everything all the time? And how do I deal with the sort of totality or completionist problem? Do I record everything from every source I ever got? And is that the only way that I prove authority? And I think that with time, the short answer we've come up with is just start at a certain timestamp, align everything by time, and then just keep adding. Append only unless your data is so big that you need to keep a rolling window. And when it comes to should I archive everything, the answer is no, don't archive everything. Just focus on making your data usable in a sort of like clear context. And so I want to share the example, the counterexample from Query that we were sort of showing. I'm going to do this without an app just so that we can sort of see this really quickly without any downloads. So this is an example that we built that is also time series data and weather related. And this is just there is a transform script running in the background that every 15 minutes goes and fetches the weather for our location in Brooklyn and publishes an update to this data set. So this data set is 3,222 entries. That means there are actually 3,222 commits. And so every time it just makes an observation and it adds a single row, makes an observation, adds a single row, and hits publish. So it's a very long, just like trail of history of time. But what this accumulates for us is like the value of this data set is intentionally that it's only Brooklyn, and that it is set up in a way that it allows us to say, hey, these are, for the people that care about the data for Brooklyn, this works for them. And the data is presented most importantly in a tabular format. And so this is easier for a human to get their head around, right? They can see if they were to take SO shreds and just rip off the UI, right? Does the data underneath sort of present itself in this sort of interpretable way, in a way that I could get in quickly and ideally make some other alternative sort of remixy style use of. But I think that's the value in publishing your data, right? If you want to publish your data with the intent for someone to use it, great. If you want to archive your data, then I don't think the sort of like readability is as important. Maybe I think there's like an interest there in how we do it. But to get to the chase, because I don't want to take up too much time here, this is how we would largely do it inside of Query. I've researched here, there is a CSV export from Firebase, which is great. And I think that that's the best place to start. CSV files, we have found that increasingly for us, when we're talking about data, JSON documents are tough for people. CSV files work in Microsoft Excel. We have a lot of folks who just like see a tabular data and it makes more sense to them. And so when you talk to people that work in data science, they work a lot more in tables. And so we've increasingly been spending more and more time taking large JSON API documents and turning them into tables. It's just been easier for everybody to understand, and it's making more sense all the time. So I immediately jumped to this like Firebase CSV thing, which is exciting to see that there is something. This data that comes out might not look the exact way that you want, but given that you are using Firebase, you have a CSV export button. Awesome. And so what that'll mean is you would end up with a CSV file. And so I'm very quickly going to just like invent a CSV file here that is going to be like some data modeling here. So we would do river and then water level. And then we would most importantly would have a time.
Yeah.
And so like, cool, really basic. And then what we'd have is like, this would be a timestamp. We're going to cheat and pull some text from here. Cool. Here's a timestamp. And then what was the river that we were using? And like in this case, like a lot of folks would be like, oh no, you should use an identifier. But like, again, we're talking about data that is intended to kind of be human readable. So like I would invent like a Laura Gorge. And I think it's totally fine to repeat that 1,000 times. If your data doesn't export this way, it's not the end of the world. And then water level, what's an example of an actual reading?
4.81 is, yeah.
Okay, so let's try 4.81. Cool, and then I would save this as a CSV file as an example. I'm just gonna put this on my desktop and call this shreds.csv. Cool. So now this is on my desktop. Where's my desktop? My desktop is buried. But here's Query desktop. This is the new application that we ship. I'm going to take this shreds.csv file. Hopefully you guys can see this. I'm going to drag it over here. I'm going to release. And ideally this works. Hopefully. Yes, for live demo. Hopefully it works. Oh yeah, there it is. Importing. Cool. So it imported. We don't have a history yet. We have, so now it's going to ask us to check this out, but we've already created a commit. Have we created a commit? No, we haven't yet. I have to reload this. But after reloading this once, oh no, is that going to break everything? Damn, demos. Drats. Let me try reloading this once more. This is the one downside of like, hey, just demo in 2 seconds. So like, I have which version of the app have I built? If I built this, this is my most recent build of this. But okay, cool. I've got this. There's a commit. I'm going to check this out really quick. What checkout does is this creates a link to my file folder. It's like a place where I can just drop stuff like a Git repo. Not entirely necessary, but it helps. And I'm going to call this folder shreds. Cool. Create. Open. What? Shoot. Why is this not working? Cancel. Go back. Screw this. If we look at, is this just completely not working? Oh man, I'm sorry. Check out. Dang, damn it. Okay, well, we'll do this from the command line because apparently desktop is being mean to me. If I look at here and I do, because I already did the drag in query, I already created a desktop for me, a data set for me. So if I do query list shreds, I have this shred CSV thing already created. It's got 1 entry, 0 errors. And if I do query get body as an example, this is going to show the actual data that we had. But most importantly, if I do query publish me shreds CSV, that will send that. Cool. And that is now on E5 shreds CSV. So that's now been published to cloud, which for us is a centralized thing that makes your IPFS stuff permanently available. But if we look here and I do query log me shreds CSV, hopefully this is large enough so you can actually see it. We actually have an IPFS hash for this. And so this setup, when I'm actually running Query Connect, is connected to IPFS and serving that data set history over IPFS. And if I'm on another network, I can do query peers list. I'm actually connected to other query peers and they can grab that data from me directly. But when when my node is off and like we're totally back in re-centralized land, we hold a copy on IPFS for you, sort of like in this query cloud repository. So if I were to try and just do like IPFS add from a naked repository, and I were to use that query log of this, it'll be available even if this node is off because we've published it to that other place.
So that's interesting. Okay. So there's like a fallback to centralization via query.
Yeah. So we run IPFS in a cloud,
right?
Which makes it available. But we think that's like a stopgap in between, right? Because you want a high level of availability. Like if it's relying on you being there, it's not great. But so we do that for anything that's public. We don't allow that for anything yes, it is very similar to how Hashbase does that stuff. Like we're basically running a pinning service behind the whole thing.
So and then there's this other thing. Maybe I should say that I have this journal. And as soon as I realized there might be 3 other people who want to do it, I made all the journal entries private by default. Mm-hmm. And I can kind of see in Firebase how I would allow somebody to open up their thing. But I don't know in IPFS how to make something private.
Yeah, great question. Not really doable without encryption.
Right.
And so on our end, we're actually coming out with our own sort of like everybody's sewing their own bespoke encryption on top of IPFS because it's not baked into any of the decentralized protocols. Well, no, I can't say any, but any of the popularized decentralized protocols. Yeah, encryption's tough. But I think sorry, Kelsey, you had a question.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a few questions. I'm trying to figure out what's most pertinent. But like for Matt's use case, I'm assuming that Matt, you'd want to like continuously, you'd want to get off Firebase and use Query as your backend. So then there's two major questions around that. Like one of them is this cloud pinning service. Are you just letting anybody put stuff on your cloud? And then secondly, and this relates to the append question, but like how, I know you have transforms that let you pull data on an ongoing basis, which I'm hoping to learn to use once my database migration issues with Query clear up.
Yeah. And so we can.
That doesn't seem like the same use case as Firebase fits, because Firebase is just, I guess it feels like it's designed to receive data continuously.
The way I have it set up on Firebase is that a journal entry gets saved permanently, and the current level gets rewritten every 5 minutes, and if you're logged in, if you're logged in, it gets rewritten to your local, like it's stored in a Redux store, and then it gets rewritten to Firebase, and if you're not logged in, nothing's happening. So,
Don, do you have something?
I just had kind of a quick question about, like, I feel like there's a few projects that are trying to roll some databasey things on top of IPFS in addition to Query. So I guess I was thinking about Textile, and Anytype was providing, well, Anytype I know released about, and that seems much more like, remember that like app ecosystem thing, that app.io? I feel like Anytype is more in that vein, but Textile seems like a thing, and you mentioned this other one, like in comparison to Query, like, I don't know, do you have a strong sense of that like ecosystem or broader set of things, and are any of them getting, do they have different approaches, or is there a way to kind of like start to compare them?
Yeah, totally. Textile's amazing. We've been trying for a while to sort of actually collaborate at the protocol level. Been reviewing each other's white papers a bunch. They're delightful folks. And I also mentioned OrbitDB, which is actually just a raw database, which is an append-only log. I think Anytype is more Notion decentralized, which is like knowledge-based management stuff, which is great, but to me is much more emphasis on the UI than the actual data, like decentralization stuff. It was great to see the Anytype folks. I met them at IPFS camp. Really great stuff. For me, so I think it harkens back to the question that Kelsey asked of like, well, you would want to switch to using Query as your backend. And I don't actually think that's a good idea. And I think because we have things like Firebase, which are great for, like, databases are great at databasey stuff. They are a place where you can put canonical information. And then what I think you want to do is share the value that you're creating with that data, right? And instead of saying decentralization is an either or proposition, we are either using centralized technologies or decentralized technologies. I think we would instead want to say, hey, let's conceive of, let's create data and publish it, right? Like what Matt's doing is, like, why should he have to change his entire tech stack to like fit all of these decentralized things? And if he can't get it to work, then it's a failure. Instead, why can't we just tail the awesome data that he's creating and put it out there for other people to use who are familiar with data? And so that's much more what Query is. It's more of like we started calling it like friends with data sets or tables with friends. Like it's much more about sort of like publishing these versioned and auditable histories of usable data sets, not about creating a database that you can like actively like pound with like fresh requests. Versioning that is just like it's not going to go well. But what I think is interesting is like this sort of whole database architecture creates this siloing problem that leads us to like all want to centralize really heavily because we want to because infrastructurally we want to control stuff. And so we're just trying to create a pressure release valve. So how that compares to Textile actually is undertaking the harder project of like building a framework for you to build apps in a decentralized context, right? And so they are working on providing the primitives for doing stuff like user authentication, privacy, encryption and sharing. Like their chief tool like Threads is all about being able to manage who can see something and dealing with access control, which is a very, very, very vital layer for getting to sort of leveraging yourself up in the stack. They're also sort of shipping in a sort of append-only log style, Firebase style thing to allow people to do decentralized coordination. I can tell you right now, I love all of us in this decentralized space to bits. We're a long ways off from like getting a lot of this stuff to work properly. It's really, really, really hard stuff and really, really hard work. But I think it would be really nice to be worth it. I think the tack that we've taken is a little more of like, okay, we're not going to be your database. We're going to be your way to sort of like publish interesting data that someone else might be able to sort of do something cool with. So ideally, we're an addition to what you do, not a replacement, if that makes sense. And Kelsey, I totally didn't answer your like transform script question. I would love to tackle that in like a full thing, particularly after not this sprint, but the next one for us. At the end of January, we're launching all of our transform tools in desktop, which will mean writing those scripts is a lot easier, and then automating them will actually happen inside of desktop.
I would love if you came and gave a talk to my decentralized web meetup if you were ever on the West Coast for this.
Totally.
I would love an entire talk on how that works.
Totally. Yeah, we've been having a good talk. It's actually, I know that my demo kind of blew up. It's mainly because I had a really weird wonky build of the app, but like, yeah, we're starting to drive real downloads lately. People are like using it for stuff. But it's been weird. We've had to sort of take a step back from decentralization a little bit and say, we are keeping all of our decentralized principles in place, but we have to turn on like these peer-to-peer features and these sort of like decentralization features only as they feel production ready, and production ready in contrast to like centralized like standards, not decentralized standards. And that means like not consuming all of the user's RAM when your app is just idling. And like we were having all of these complaints that like, we can't use your thing because I don't have the latest hardware, and so I can't run your thing. And so for us, we're sort of taking this longer road approach of like, okay, cool. All data inquiry will write to IPFS. You will keep a local IPFS node. And when you publish, you will be moving IPFS blocks somewhere. But we will use this sort of like intermediate sort of, as you were saying, Don, hash-based style, or Infura, who are another company that wants. Also, have you heard of Pinata? They're great too. They do a great pinning service. I would link to them. But anyways, I hope that helps. This is a bit long-winded. But Matt, I'd love to do like a proper sit down of like how to actually get your data, like, because I think the really interesting part is actually the modeling, right? Like of choosing your column titles and like saying what do you want to show and how do you want to show it? And that could be like a really exciting data set of like, hey, this is like, we're going to be really interested in this one place and we're going to publish a time series data set of stuff around this. And then a corresponding data set of journal entries for people who want to publish that like has a natural linking between them where you can see how something went at a specific time. But
right. And so in any case, a transitional thing would be to like publish stuff to IPFS and not rely on it, you know, as a backing,
yeah,
or something like that. Okay, that's cool.
I don't want to cut you all off, but I'm gonna exit, and I think I can do it without ending the meeting.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be helping Maceo do his homework.
So let's schedule another one of these, and I'll prep properly, and we'll do this right.
Me too.
Really
Okay.
nice to see you all. Bye.
Great seeing everybody.
All
Take care.
right. Oh, hey, Kevin. Bye.